Almost all of you sitting here are deprived. You were deprived of not knowing Mr. and Mrs. Shapell personally, something that many of our alumni were privileged to know. So one of the things we'll try to do is give you a little bit of a sense of who they were, because they were great people. And I suggest that if you're really interested, and you should be, we have lots of recordings of each of the Yahrtzeit programs as well as the Shloshim program, and they were much more extensive on who these people were. But a little bit. So one of the psukim that I opened one of the Yahrtzeit programs with still resonates and has to resonate. Mikimi me'afar dal, me'ashpot yarim evyon. Kodesh Baruch Hu raises up the poor person from the dust, and from the garbage raises up the downtrodden. Mikimi me'afar dal, me'ashpot yarim evyon. Holocaust survivors are mikimi me'afar dal, me'ashpot yarim evyon. But what is the next pasuk? Lahoshivi im nidivim. To place them with the nidivim. A nidiv is a person of generosity, and continues the pasuk im nidivei amo. What's the double lashon? Says the Metzudas David. Not only are they put with the nidivim, with the generous people, but nidivei amo, the choicest of the generous people. It's simply incomprehensible for us to appreciate where Mr. and Mrs. Shapell came from in the depths of the Holocaust, in Russia, in prisons, to rise to what they accomplished. Nidivei amo is a phrase that repeats itself now as we're going to be talking about the building of the Mishkan. This Shabbos is Parshat Shkalim, Machatzit HaShekel. It was the coin used for the Mishkan. And of course, one of the questions, if you're paying attention, is the incompetence of the fundraiser. It says, Ha'ashir lo yarbeh, v'hadal lo yamit. Machatzit HaShekel, the wealthy people can't give more, the poor people can't give less. And I certainly hope that our fundraising department doesn't pay attention to that. But what's the message? Ha'ashir lo yarbeh, because wealthy people like to be in charge. They like to give a lot and run the show. And therefore the first message is, Ha'ashir lo yarbeh, your giving has to be egoless. Hadal lo yamit, a poor person has lots of excuses not to give. And what the Torah is saying is, when we're going to build the Mishkan for the Jewish people, the wealthy people cannot do it with arrogance and power control, and the poor people can't look for excuses. So what does it represent? Because we're giving a half a shekel. A half a shekel is representative of the fact that nobody can do it alone, that you're all part of a tzibur, and when we build the Mishkan has to be built to unite the Jewish people. We're going to be having Parshat Shkalim before Rosh Chodesh Adar, and the Gemara says that Haman went and he offered 10,000 shkalim to Achashverosh to destroy the Jewish people. And his claim was, it's an am mifuzar umifurad bein ami. There is disunity. There is machlokes. There is division among the Jewish people. And it says in the Gemara, therefore God says, you have to give your machatzit shekel in advance to counteract his 10,000 shekels. He's claiming we're an am mefuzaro meforad, machatzit shekel, everybody giving half shows that we're united. One of the things that we came to learn, I grew up in Los Angeles, I grew up with the Shapells, and we learned, I didn't know it as a little kid, but I learned it much later when I had a more professional relationship with them and an interaction. They despised machlokas. They ran from machlokas. They were all about Jewish unity. A word that always resonates with me when that Jacob, the shul, they changed rabbis. And as you know, Rabbi Pruzansky, as a shul rabbi, knows that every time a new rabbi comes in, he's never as good as the last rabbi. And there was always criticism. And I remember Mrs. Shapell saying, she said to me, but she said it in meetings, he is our rabbi. We have to support him. No machlokas, didn't allow machlokas. So that's the message of Machzit HaShekel, and that's one of the things. David was known as somebody, his peers, because they had a lot of money and a lot of control, they made sure that their opinion is going to win. And David was a person who ran away from machlokas. That's Nidivei Amo, the choicest of the Nidivim. But one of the phrases that repeats itself multiple times when we're talking about the Mishkan, V'yikhu li truma kol nidiv libo, v'yavo kol ish asher nesa'o libo, v'chol asher nadva rucho. Nidivut, generosity, is part of a personality. You have to be a nediv lev. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Shapells from the depths of Ashpot Yarim Evyon and made them into the Nedivim because they had hearts of Nedivut. They had hearts of generosity. Why am I sharing all of this with you, and there'll be more, is because you have to appreciate that what they accomplished from where they came is mechayev, makes every one of you responsible to give beyond what you think you're capable of giving for the welfare of the Jewish people. Focused on Nediv Lev, what can I contribute? And it would have been the simplest thing for them. They still lived before this victim mentality that has permeated our culture, but they could have easily called themselves victims, and I don't have any responsibilities. After what I went through, I was a victim. And it was exactly the opposite. It's clear that they survived because they had a vision, they had a commitment. Viktor Frankl talks about that in Man's Search for Meaning. It's very clear that they had it from the beginning, devotion to Klal Yisrael, devotion to the Jewish people. They had three basic agendas, three basic foci, as they became involved in how do we influence the Jewish people. As Holocaust survivors, the state of Israel was primary to them. And they invested tremendous amounts of money in the state and in the soldiers. They gave many soldiers, what do they call them, welfare recreation centers, and they made sure that in every single one of them there was a Sefer Torah. They didn't just give the money to build the building, they made sure there was a Sefer Torah. Judaism was fundamental. The state of Israel is the Jewish state. You can imagine, it was very clear every time you spoke to David about it. From the Holocaust to see the state of Israel, miraculous. And he felt that. Holocaust Memorial. We have a Holocaust program. It's proven to be very, very successful. It was at their behest because the sense was we have to always know what happened so that we can always make sure that the Jewish people are strong. Our history. We came back, and the Jews always come back. That's part of the nature of the Jewish people. But to know what a comeback means, you have to know how bad it was and how great it is. And Jewish education, the future, the Jewish education that they invested in, each of you is a beneficiary of that investment, and Jewish families, the future of the Jewish people, the greatest revenge on Hitler, Fela always used to say, was Jewish families. And that's why our married couples program and with our alumni building such wonderful families was so important to them. I'm reminded of two anecdotes that just somehow or other in my mind really represents some really unique, very special things. Their relationship as husband and wife were unbelievable. The devotion that each one had to each other was off the charts. I wish every one of you should be able to emulate that on some level. But Rebbetzin, Karlinsky, and I saw it in action, even though we knew about it in general, but we saw it in action one Shavuos when we were scholars in residence in Beth Jacob. And as happens in a shul, there was a Yizkor campaign. Yizkor, the rabbi gets up and he makes a fundraising appeal, and that year was for the Israeli soldiers. It's been many years ago. And of course, the wealthy people are the ones that first started off. Got to start it off with good big donations. You don't want people to give $18, $25. So Mr. Shapell was one of the first donors, $18,000. And it's going, and people are giving, and it's slowing down a little bit. And then Mr. Shapell gets up. David gets up and walks over to the mechitza. And his wife sat in the front in the mechitza, and he whispers something. They're having a little bit of an exchange. And then he goes back to his seat, raises his hand, I'm raising my gift to $100,000. This is back in the 1990s. That's a lot more money than it is today. What just happened? He wasn't ready to just give another $100,000 till he talks to his wife. They have to both be on board. Respect, unbelievable. The other anecdote is something that I saw once. I was in the fancy kosher restaurant. Somebody took me, and I see Mrs. Shapell is there at a table with older women. What's going on? She had a minhag. Once a week, she took all the widows that lived in the neighborhood. Widows, they're alone. They have nothing. Most of them couldn't even afford a restaurant. Once a week, she took these widows to the fancy kosher restaurant to treat them to lunch. You know, nobody asked her to do that. She thought of that herself. This is what Ravolbi likes to call a lamdan in chesed, an expert. You don't just do chesed. You really think deeply about chesed. These were the people, your beneficiaries. We're all beneficiaries of their generosity, of their vision, their caring, their devotion to the Jewish people, their commitment to ensure that after the Holocaust, everything gets rebuilt. And they left the Holocaust and they came to Los Angeles after Detroit. And there's no question that God shined a light on them. And it's clear that it was because of the kind of people that they were. It's a great honor to carry their names on our yeshiva and seminary. It's a machayev. You know what a machayev is? It's a commitment. It makes us committed to living on a daily basis their values, educating for their values, and for each of you to build the Jewish homes, the state of Israel, the Jewish communities abroad that was so important to them. Holocaust education was critical, and that's why we have a Holocaust program. We've always devoted the Yahrtzeit program to a lecture on the Holocaust, and it is our great honor this year to have Rabbi Stephen Pruzansky, Rabbi Emeritus of one of the most significant shuls on the East Coast. I have to say the East Coast because Beth Jacob was considered the significant shul on the West Coast. Okay, when I was growing up, Beth Jacob had the reputation. It was the biggest Orthodox shul west of the Mississippi. Okay, but Rabbi Pruzansky's east of the Mississippi, and his shul was one of the famous shuls in Teaneck, and it's a great, great honor to have Rabbi Pruzansky share his thoughts with us.
B'shut Rav Karlinsky, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I'm actually humbled and honored and embarrassed to be here. Humbled because the Shapells are so well known in the Jewish world as Marbitze Torah and as Balei Chesed, and they're really symbols not just of perseverance, but of resilience and ultimately triumph. And like Rav Karlinsky said, it's a triumph over Hitler. Our state, our families, the growth, the flourishing of the Jewish people with all the enemies that we have. And that should continue, and it's up to all of us to make that continue. I titled my lecture tonight, Remembering the Holocaust, Why and What? And maybe it seems obvious. I don't think it's so obvious because obviously there's so many things that happen in the Jewish world today that would seem to supersede the Holocaust 80 years ago already. Almost 40 years ago, I took a family trip with my wife and kids to Canada, from New York to Montreal. And as we entered Quebec, I noticed right away every license plate says on Je me souviens. I remember. Came to a toll booth. Young people won't remember what a toll booth is, but you could tell them. And I asked the toll keeper, what is it that you remember? And he said to me, what are you talking about? And I said, every license plate is Je me souviens. And he said, I don't know. And I looked into it, and the fact is, what they remember is actually enigmatic. Nobody really knows. Someone coined that slogan 150 years ago. Maybe he knew, but no one else knows. That's not our world. So the truth is, we're not the only nation that has suffered atrocities. And we could say the Holocaust is unique, and it was unique, but like Rabbi Karlinsky implied, the victimhood competition is most unseemly. So why do we remember? And what exactly are we supposed to remember? What specifically? So I brought this, it's quite old, for two reasons. The second reason is, every time I opened it over the last few days, it shed some pages onto the floor, little specks of paper, and my wife was getting annoyed. So I took it with me. But the first reason is, it's the RCA Sermon Manual from 1945, published in Tov Shin Vav, for Rosh Hashanah of the year 45-46, meaning right after the Holocaust. I remember I took this from my father, Al Hashem's library, many years ago, because I assumed, and I really wanted to know, what did rabbis have to say at that time? These are sermons right after the Holocaust, right after VE Day, right after the war ended. There's even reference made to the atomic bomb. It's right after World War II. And I was actually flabbergasted. There's almost no mention of the Holocaust. Every now and then, maybe in most of the sermons, there'll be a reference, cryptic, to Hitler's excesses or the catastrophe in Europe. But most of the sermons are dedicated to combating assimilation and what we could do for Jewish unity and try to increase Shmirat Shabbat and Kashrut and Mitzvot. There's almost nothing. I was hoping to actually read a kino, have a sermon, have a drasha that was a kino over the massacres of 6 million Jews. Nothing. And I can't say I was disappointed, and one takeaway from it was, what really could they say? What explanation? What words of comfort? What consolation could they give to Jewish communities in America where probably literally ein bait asher ein shamet, everyone had suffered a loss. And certainly this is a period of great uncertainty. Many of the people did not even realize, like my grandfather, for example, didn't realize his brother and family were killed until several years later, until 46, when they got an eyewitness report. And my other grandfather didn't learn the fate of his parents. My great-grandmother was murdered in Treblinka, didn't learn it for a few years. But nonetheless, they all knew that these people had disappeared. And I was hoping the rabbis would say something, and they didn't. And maybe that meant also that sometimes vayidom aro, what is there to say? Sometimes silence is best until we can organize our thoughts until we can harness our emotions and try to say something cogent and meaningful. What was there to say? The bottom line is, it's still very hard to grasp after all these years. How could human beings become animals, devoid of souls? How is that possible? Who knows what human beings can be capable of? And the answer is that we know. We know. We know because of the Holocaust. We know even more now. Our generation knows because of October 7th, which was a Holocaust for a day. Jews were hunted and tortured and murdered and led into captivity. Jews were vulnerable and defenseless for a day, Baruch Hashem. But even the Nitzachon, maybe not yet Muchlat, but the Nitzachon, even that should remind us that with all our might and our cleverness and our weaponry and our sophistication, sometimes that's insufficient before the Nefesh HaBahami. At least the Nazis tried to hide what they did. The Arabs celebrated it. They filmed it. Gleeful. I'm struck until this day, we all know, a son calls his parents from a Jewish house and says, "Put father on the phone. I just murdered 10 Jews with my own hands." Do we realize the extent of the depravity that has to exist in a son who was killed by the IDF, by the way, subsequently, by a son who informs his parents of this and just assumes they'd be proud of it? It's hard to reconcile. It's hard to fathom that people should employ their intelligence just to murder. Very hard. Sinwar planned for 10 years. Dedicated to murdering Jews. All planned. Babi Yar, 32,000 Jews were murdered over a few days in September 1941. Outside of Riga, in the Rumbala forest, 27,000 Jews were gunned down over 2 days in late autumn 1941. All that before there was an Auschwitz. All that before there was a Treblinka. All that even before there was a Wannsee conference. I visited Wannsee many years ago. Wannsee it's a suburb of Berlin, and where the conference took place, it's in a mansion, a villa, beautiful villa, owned by Jews until the SS confiscated it, situated right on Lake Wannsee. A very beautiful, bucolic setting. So much so, I was there in May, and you could see the people swimming on the other side of the lake. Beautiful. January 20th, 1942, 15 Nazis gathered together to plot the final solution. Eichmann was one, Heydrich. There were, among the 15, 8 people with doctorates. They met for 90 minutes. Lunch was served, and the entire final solution was planned over that lunch. There was no dissent. If Holocaust deniers would base their denial on the impossibility that human beings could possibly do this, I would sympathize with them. The problem is that people who deny the Holocaust would love to perpetrate another one against Jews and then deny that as well. So the world would like us to forget the Holocaust. Even some of our friends and acquaintances, the International Holocaust Day was about 2 weeks ago, and the Vice President of the United States, Vance, issued a statement, a very nice statement, deploring the Holocaust, but neglecting to mention either Jews or Nazis. Just evil. Joe Biden had done the same thing 2 or 3 years before. Somehow to decouple the Jews from the Holocaust is obscene. But that's the way the world is. It's a linguistic feat. Holocaust, no need to mention Jews. Our enemies, I believe this very strongly, the false accusations of genocide, of ethnic cleansing, because they don't care any more about Gazans than they do about Iranians or Syrians or Kurds or Lebanese or anyone else. These criticisms are designed to eradicate any type of Holocaust guilt they might feel that might still exist in the world. As if to say, see, given the chance, Jews are the same. They're no different. What they lack, aside from morality, is any sense of memory. Because the first time I heard Jews accused of genocide against Arabs was in the mid-1970s, when Arafat came on the international scene, and then it became de rigueur that the Arabs would accuse Israel of committing genocide amongst Palestinians in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. It's an old accusation. But now it's taking root more. The reality we know, we risk soldiers' lives to protect the lives of guilty civilians. We don't murder the enemy intentionally and systematically. But one thing is true. Any lingering guilt over the Holocaust that the world had is gone, gone. And the evil that lurks in the human heart is still unfathomable. And it's not going to change because of memorials or museums or statues or even education. And they're all worthy in their own way, except maybe education as to morality, as to right and wrong and good and evil. So what are the lessons of the Holocaust? I like to say that those who fail to remember the past are doomed to learn the name George Santayana. And that's true. But we have to understand the why. Why do we remember? And what exactly are we remembering? And the why is very basic. Purim is coming in a few weeks. Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek, baderech b'tzeitchem miMitzrayim. Who's Amalek? Rav Soloveitchik said, quoting his father, that Amalek is any nation hamitnakelet lichalot knesset Yisrael, any nation that conspires to extirpate the Jewish people, hofechet al pi halacha Amalek. They're transformed by halacha into Amalek, meaning Amalek is not figurative. Amalek is literal. That's Amalek. Whether it's the Nazis or Hamas or Iran, any nation that conspires, that aspires to murder the Jewish people, that's Amalek. If it occurred to me today, the whole machloket that existed about Zachar and Zecher, the mistake that was made by Yoav ben Sruya, he only killed the males because he misread the pasuk. Timchet Zachar Amalek. What's he thinking? Zachar Amalek is a genetic concept. It's a biological concept. Kill the males. Zecher is not genetic. Zecher, remembrance, is ideology. And we're told Timchet Zecher Amalek. It's not a physical construct, but those who share that evil ideology, they make it into a physical construct. So we've always been subject to hatred from the time of Avram Ivri, and certainly Misinai, Shemisham Yarda Sina Le'olam, that's the reality. But Amalek is special. Amalek is unique because we had no grievance with them. Asher karcha baderech, we didn't attack them. We didn't harm them. We had no territorial dispute with them. It just v'lo yirei Elokim. They're not a God-fearing people. And because we're God's people, they hate us. And that hatred is unassuageable. Amalek is having a revival. One prosaic reason to remember the Holocaust is vigilance. The Holocaust provided the Jewish people with a grace period, maybe 25 years in all, when hatred of Jews was unfashionable. And even people who hated Jews, they had to keep it underground. They couldn't publicize it because civil society, so to speak, frowned on it. Then it reappeared. It reappeared. Maybe it was frowned on a little less, and now it's returned with a vengeance. No guilt, no shame, no hesitation. And of course, it's concealed, or attempted to be concealed, under the guise of anti-Zionism. I don't hate Jews. I just hate Israel, the nation state of the Jews. I love Jews, but the Jews have no right to their own state. It's gotten so bad that I wrote an article a few months ago, which the tagline was, just because someone says they hate Israel doesn't mean they're not anti-Semites. Because every Jew hater in the world is claiming, oh, we don't hate Jews, we just hate Israel. The bottom line is, if you hate Israel and you conspire to destroy Israel, it's a presumption that you hate Jews too. Maybe a rebuttable presumption, but it's a presumption. So that's a why. We know what can happen to us if we let our guard down. But what are we remembering? What is it about the Holocaust that we remember? And I think it can be synopsized in 4 words. Or Haman u'Baruch Mordechai. And the Chazal note, Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai are equal in Gematria, both 502. And there's a mitzvah levasume bepuria adelo yada bein Or Haman levarach Mordechai, to become intoxicated or buzzed, or maybe not, until you don't know the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. So what's Or Haman? I think it's time we acknowledge that our enemies exist because God provides us in every generation with a counterforce to ensure that we do not stray from our mission. And all our enemies, with all their violence and their vile hatred, all of them serve this role, shevet apo, like the Navi said, the wrath of God's anger. Because so often when we think about the Holocaust, we think about the how. How do they do it? And how could it have been prevented? Well, we should be thinking more about what does it mean and what does it mean. So the Gemara says in Megillah, Gedola Hasara Tabat Yoter mi 48 Nevi'im v'Sheva Nevi'ot Shenitnabu Lohen LiYisrael. When Achashverosh took off his signet ring and gave it to Haman and said to him, do what you want with whomever you want, that had a greater effect on Jews than all the words of the 48 prophets and the 7 prophetesses, because they could not talk us into tshuva. And when Achashverosh took off his ring and gave it to Haman, yes, it sparked a revival, a renaissance of Jewish life. The British writer Samuel Johnson famously said 2 centuries ago, almost three centuries ago, he said, depend on it, sir, when a man knows he's to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates his mind wonderfully. That's a paraphrase of the Gemara in Megillah. What? We have to realize why they exist, but realize as well, this is Amalek. We shouldn't mince words. Israel's wars produced a new level of Jew hatred that's not been seen in a long time. So it always existed. Even in America, it always existed. But now, it's a different level. It's excused. It's rationalized. It's even mainstreamed in the Democratic Party and a significant wing of the Republican Party. Mainstream means there's no social price to be paid for it. There's no political price to be paid for it. And that's Amalek, like Chazal say. They jumped into the hot bath and cooled it down for everyone else. Mamdani. The truth is, living in Israel, I don't feel the same horror about him because he has little effect on our lives here. But in America, Jews are frightened. And they should be frightened because he paid no price for hating Israel, for hating Jews. That 33% of Jews in New York voted for him. All right, I can quibble with the numbers. A lot of people don't realize 5% of German Jews voted for Hitler in 1933. 5%. Because they felt a lot of what he was saying was campaign rhetoric. And in fact, these Jews famously wrote to Hitler after he became chancellor by their official organization, and they wrote to him that we're good Germans. We all fought in World War I. The election is over. We recognize, you have to appeal to your base. We are loyal. Let's work together. Hitler never responded, or I guess he did respond eventually. Here's a memo to Mamdani and all the others. All those who claim they are hostile to Israel, but not to Jews, are lying. And I subscribe to what Rabbi Sachs said. Very beautifully, Rabbi Sachs. He said, in the Middle Ages, they said, we don't hate Jews. We just hate their religion. And in the 19th century, they said, we don't hate Jews, just their race. And now they say, we don't hate Jews, just their nation state. No. If you are against Israel, you're a Jew hater. If you oppose the Jewish national idea, you're a Jew hater. If you believe that Jews are not entitled to a homeland, then you repudiate the Bible, and you're a Jew hater. And we should stop with the semantic games that we got used to playing, all the intellectual acrobatics. Personally, I wrote this years ago. We should shelve this designation of anti-Semites and anti-Semitism. Why do we use a euphemism? I have never met a single Jew who defines himself as a Semite. No. I support Semitic education. No, nobody thinks like that. It's used as a euphemism. It was invented by an anti-Semite, by a Jew hater in the 1870s. It was invented to sort of shield the harshness of the accusation that you're not anti-Jewish. Something against Semites. All right, Semites. Sounds like termites. Semites. No, we should stop using it. So someone explained to me, a famous journalist, we can't abandon it because it's the brand. And in advertising, once the brand is out there, you can't change it. Name recognition. I think it hurts us. It doesn't help us. And something else also doesn't help us. No one gets a pass if they hate Jews. We shouldn't try to understand them. We shouldn't blame ourselves. We have no animus towards any group or any person. We don't give a pass to white supremacists or black supremacists who hate Jews, to Muslims or Christians or Arabs or Persians or Americans or Russians or the BBC or arts for that matter. We don't look away because the Jew hater is part of the same political party that we are, or he's popular on cable news, or she has a podcast, or they have money, or they claim that they're also victims. No. Or Haman, at every occasion, we have to be vigilant in exposing the hypocrisy. To me, it's almost a laughable form of hypocrisy. There's a new social crime called Islamophobia. Islamophobia means that it's wrong to blame individual innocent Muslims for the violent act of other Muslims. And those who are very quick to claim that they're victims of Islamophobia, somehow they don't see the hypocrisy in blaming Jews, innocent Jews, for what they see as the crimes of Israel. It's the same accusation. That's why you know it's phony. It's contrived. It's not real. Because they don't want to treat us the way they themselves expect to be treated. Those who can't call out Jew hatred because they happen to be on their team, so we won't forget. And yeah, it's hard to accept, but Jew hatred lives. The Nazi brand of Jewish hatred was defeated. Their noxious brand of hatred. But Jew hatred comes in many, many different forms. And the most popular form today is anti-Zionism. That's Or Haman. What's the second lesson of the Holocaust? That's Baruch Mordechai. Mika Amcha Yisrael. We are an unbelievable people. We forfeit true understanding of the Holocaust if we only see victimhood. There's a museum in Kfar Haroeh led by Rav Avram Krieger. It's worth a trip, called Shem Olam. And he's dedicated to displaying and propagating the spiritual heroism of the Holocaust, chronicling Jewish spiritual resistance. Not all Jews are on the same page, but how much do we know about the struggle to daven, to keep kosher, to observe Shabbat, to learn Torah, do acts of chesed? Not enough. There's a fellow I knew in Muncie. I knew his son, actually. His name was Isaac Kram, Olav Shalom. He was a survivor of 5 years in slave labor camps and finally in Buchenwald. And his son gave me a memoir that his father had written. And in one camp, he and a fellow prisoner wrote a siddur from memory that he kept with him throughout the war, and the family still has it until today, still extant. He had a famous cousin, Rav Eliezer Dessler, and he wrote to Rav Dessler after the war. Rav Dessler then was in Britain, I think in Gateshead, Gateshead, and he said, I don't have a pair of tefillin. Agav, I had a member in my shul, Mr. Pell, Olav Shalom, who lamented to me once. He was also in camps for 4 years. The first thing he thought of at liberation, I have to get a pair of tefillin. I have not put on tefillin in 4 years. Rav Dessler writes back with a package, I'll send you mine. And Rav Dessler sent his Muhutter tefillin from Kelm to his cousin. And then he ended his letter, his missive to his cousin, Isaac Kram, by saying, Hashem should keep you a strong and passionate Jew, attached to Torah and Yiddishkeit. Hashem will help you, my dear one, and you will yet have a lot of nachat in your life. And indeed it was so. He raised the family, l'shem tiferet. Jews who refused to eat treif. Jews who found ways to light Ner Chanukah. Jews who learned Torah while working. Jews who baked matzot in the barracks. Jews who held a Seder, and multiply the story 1,000, 10,000 times over, and we remind ourselves and teach our children that we're an eternal people. The Bluzheva Rebbe was a survivor of a number of camps, last in Bergen-Belsen, lived to be 100 years old. He made a Seder, secretively, furtively, in Bergen-Belsen, and he spoke to his fellow prisoners, and he said that all other Sedarim, we have matzah, we have wine, we have Haggadah. They didn't have matzah. All we have is maror. All we have is bitter herbs, lechem oni, death and suffering. And yet do not despair. Why? Why shouldn't they despair? And he said, the Bluzheva Rebbe, the fact that we can sit here in darkness and recall Yetziat Mitzrayim and celebrate Pesach, that means we're truly free. Freedom is not about where you are. Freedom is about who you are. And what a valuable lesson. He says something cute, Avodim hayinu lefar b'Mitzrayim. Why is that so encouraging? So you dissect the word avodim, the middle letter, say 3, 2, 4, 1, 5, spells out David ben Yishai Avdecha Mishichecha. Even a state of avdut, of servitude, you can feel free, feel connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's one deleterious Holocaust memory. Haman is bad Haman. We're all victims. The world hates us. I never thought you could build Jewish identity around a discouraging idea. It just makes people want to run away. In fact, many people, many survivors, especially in Europe, hid their identity from their children. I heard from the chief rabbi of Poland a number of times that in the last 20 years, there were all these people coming out of the woodworks saying that on their mother's deathbed, she said to them, by the way, we're Jews. I'm a Jew. I never wanted to saddle you with that because of what I experienced. He said, there are thousands of people like this, with a Jewish identity now surging to the surface. So it can't be a negative identity, but we should remember the Holocaust, to be attentive to trends, to the haters, without letting them define us. What's our identity? It's the Am Hashem, God's people. Am HaNivchar, chosen people. We have to be positive. And there's a really positive memory, and that's Mika Amcha Yisrael. We treasure life. Ki olecha haragnu kol hayom, nechshavnu kitzon tivcha. We allow ourselves to be killed for God's sake, like sheep led to the slaughter. And the Ibn Ezra comments there, it's 900 years ago, and he said, this is Eid Neman L'Dvarenu. This is testimony, faithful testimony to our words, that we allow ourselves to be killed, though we're better people than those who kill us, and yet we say, no. We surrender even our lives for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These are distinct, Or Haman Baruch Mordechai, but they're also intertwined. We remember the Holocaust because we need to remind ourselves of who we are, why we're chosen, what is our mission. The Holocaust was unique in scale, but not in kind. V'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chaloteinu. It's every generation. Someone else, different uniform, different costume, different language, even different rationalization. But it's always someone. How we respond becomes the issue. What else is remembering the Holocaust? It's a wonderful motivator because we know what the enemy can do to us. We have no inhibitions. We know that they can be brutal. We know that that's our history, and we're a small nation. And yet we see we can come together as well. Rabbi Doron Peres has such a beautiful quote. He said that we are the smallest nation in the world, but the largest family. Think about it. We're the smallest nation in the world, so few Jews, but the largest family, because we all feel this connection with one another. It's a world of darkness and light. Navi said in Zechariah, we read this at the on the Sukkot, the day will come, v'yayom echad, hu'yivadel Hashem lo yom v'lo layla. There'll be a day that comes that's neither day nor night. V'haya le'et erev ya'or. But towards nightfall, there'll be brightness, there'll be light. Night is exile. Night is persecution, darkness, murkiness, confusion, a lack of clarity. At night, man is inactive. We're frightened because we're exposed to the elements. We feel defenseless, exposed to nature, even to human marauders. Day is clarity. Day is optimism and knowledge and redemption. Vahi be'etzem hayom hazed. God took us out at high noon from Egypt. The Red Sea split. Vayosh Hashem bayom hahu. In the middle of the day, that's the time of redemption. What Zechariah Hanavi is teaching us is so far-reaching in its significance. The era before redemption is a time of lo yom v'lo layla. It's neither night, neither day nor night. That's where we are now. The Baal Metzudot says that in fact, ye'oz nivuchim bedatam, will be perplexed. V'lo yakiru im hi hachana l'tshua l'kilayon. We're not going to know whether these events are a prelude to salvation or destruction. So many things are swirling about us. I've said for decades already. To me, Israel always seems, Rahman al-Islan, 5 minutes away from destruction or 5 minutes away from redemption. Go either way. We don't know. Iran, Hamas, Gaza, who knows? Europe, America, Asia. Who knows what's going to happen? We're so close. We're so close to redemption, but it's confusing. It's murky. It's unclear. One of these sermons was by Rav Moshe Meshalov, Olav Hashem, who's son of David, lives here in Yerushalayim. He said that Israel cannot be saved just by destroying its Hamans. Haman is best destroyed by showering blessings on Mordechai, meaning we shouldn't spend too much energy cursing Haman. It's not a productive use of our time or resources. We would better spend our time and resources blessing and educating and strengthening and uplifting and celebrating Mordechai. That's Baruch Mordechai. There was no darkness like the darkness of the Holocaust. And there are challenges before us, and haters, and those who want to destroy us, and those who still exclaim, L'chu v'nachidei migai, let us extirpate them. V'lo yizacher Shem Yisrael od. Who needs them? Who needs these people? And yet, v'hayola eit erev, hi'ar. And that too is the message of the Holocaust. Towards night, that's when the bright light starts to shine. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir. We say every morning, the night is past. A geshem chalaf halachlo. The night is past. The darkness is behind us. If we don't yet have the full brightness of the day, we can at least glimpse the light in the dark, in the distance. It's not too far off. We have to keep ourselves worthy of that day. We have to hold on a little longer. We have to never tire or lose hope. We have to grieve and celebrate the sacrifices of our elders that brought us to this day, and of our peers and children who are fighting for us as well, and be worthy of them, worthy of our future, in which will merit HaKadosh Baruch Hu taking us me'afelo le'or gadol b'mheira b'yameinu. Amen. I thank you all very much.
We want to close the Yahrtzeit program with a few words from grandson Adam Shapell, who was quite close to his grandfather. I just can't skip over the story of how David and Fela both are buried in Eretz Yisrael, not according to plans. I hope the family won't mind that I mention it, because it's so moving for me and for my wife, because David and Fela came to Israel to celebrate the bris, the birth of their first great-grandson. The son Ben lives here. He has a son Adam who lives here, and Adam had a baby boy, the first great-grandson of the Shapell family, and David and Fela come to celebrate the bris. And it was an amazing experience. Adam, I think you'll remember that Adam gave a drasha at the bris, and it was amazing. We asked for a copy because it was written. And as we were leaving, we said to David, wow, that was an amazing drasha. And I said, we have a copy of it, and David opens his pocket, says, so do I. He appreciated it. So he's here, and that on that trip, that week he came to visit the yeshiva, and Fela came to visit Midrash Rachel. And lo aleinu, David had a seizure. David had an attack, and he was hospitalized, and it was very serious. They finally stabilized him. It was really life-threatening. They stabilized him. And Fela insists that we've got to get him back to Los Angeles as soon as possible. He has to get back to his cardiologist, his doctor, Cedar Sinai. They know him. Got to go back. The doctors wouldn't let him travel right away. He stabilized, and Motzei Shabbat, the doctor said, "Okay, he can travel." And Elal set up a whole medical unit on the airplane. The family's already on the plane to fly back to Los Angeles, New York. And as they're raising, you know how they have this, what are they called? Some kind of an elevator to raise the bed and all the system. And they're raising him up. And all of a sudden, the family sees from the windows that they're raising him back down. He had a seizure. As he was getting as they were loading him on, he's not conscious, but as he was going to the plane, he had a seizure, and the doctor said there is no way he can travel. And they put him back to the hospital, and lo aleinu, a couple of days later, he passed away. Why am I telling you this? Eretz Yisrael did not let David Shapell leave. His love for Eretz Yisrael demanded that he be buried here in Eretz Yisrael. And that's what happened. And it sticks with us all the time that literally he's on the plane to be taken, and all of a sudden the body doesn't let him go. The neshama doesn't let it go. Eretz Yisrael reclaimed him, and because of that, he was zoche. The Gemara talks about how not everybody is zoche to be buried in the holy land of Eretz Yisrael, and he was. So Adam, we're going to ask Adam to share some of his memories of his grandfather, because in these few minutes, there's just no way that you could really appreciate the greatness of his grandparents. And I hope that some of the words will inspire you to somehow or other emulate their greatness.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi. First of all, I want to say that my grandparents, to reiterate what Rabbi Karlinsky was saying, they were the happiest married couple I've ever seen. 65 years they were married and just acted like newlyweds, and it was something to see. We gather here today in the month of Shvat, a month associated with roots, growth, and quiet strength. It is the season when trees begin drawing new life beneath the surface, long before anything is visible above the ground. It is the time when very real growth is happening. It's just hidden from the eye. That feels deeply fitting as we mark the Yahrtzeit of my grandparents, here in the very institution they helped establish. Much of what they built, much of who they were, and much of their legacy we continue to live with today was formed quietly and beneath the surface, however very much constantly and consistently, and with unwavering purpose. This week we will read Parshat Mishpatim. One cannot ignore the major gap between the spiritual and dramatic events of last week's Parshat Yitro, where we saw and heard the very voice of God in the most theatrical and dramatic event in the life of the Jewish nation. And this week's reading, where following the thunder and revelation of Sinai, the Torah turns immediately to laws, very human laws, responsibility, dignity, justice, and care for the vulnerable. No drama, no miracles, just how everyday people are meant to treat one another when God is no longer visibly present. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs often taught that this very transition from the drama to the everyday is the heart of Judaism. The spiritual, the loftiness, and the excitement is not enough to build a relationship with God, nor it is enough to build a nation. Love, he said, is not just a feeling, it is a commitment expressed in deeds. Mishpatim takes the heart of Judaism, Mishpatim takes the lofty vision of Sinai and translates it into a functioning society. Faith becomes structure, inspiration becomes a responsibility. And so real faith is a delicate balance between emotion and inspiration on the one hand and the minutia, detailed laws and structure on the other. That was my grandparents' mindset. They didn't just feel love for the Jewish people. They understood that after unimaginable darkness, Judaism would not survive on emotion alone. It needed institutions, much like this one. It needed education. It needed framework strong enough to carry memory forward. At the same time, while my grandparents carried the weight of the past, they never allowed it to extinguish their fire. Their legacy was not only survival, it was warmth, seeing holiness in every person, building a future infused with dignity and heart. To continue what Rabbi Karlinsky was saying, just in a slightly different version, Three pillars shaped everything they believed. The first was Holocaust remembrance. For them, remembrance was not optional. It meant ensuring the world never forgot the cost of silence, and that it is our moral obligation to ensure the Jewish people are safeguarded not by the mercy of others, but by strength, independence, and serving as a perpetual light to all nations. The second pillar of David and Fela was the state of Israel. They saw Israel as a moral and spiritual answer, a rebirth, a miracle in a world where visible and physical ones are rare to come by. My grandparents saw the state of Israel as a place where Jewish law, moral justice, and collective, as well as individual responsibility, could be practiced and lived in our own land. The third pillar was the idea of generosity and charity to the needy. They believed that true faith is expressed in giving, supporting those in need, lifting up others, and ensuring no one is left behind. 11 years ago and 5 years ago, respectively, we lost the physical presence of two incredible people, the type of people they simply don't make anymore. On the 19th of Shvat, my grandfather, my Zaidi, David Shapell, Yosef David ben Binyamin V'chaya, and on the 30th of Shvat, my grandmother, my Nana, Fela Shapell, Tzipora bat Yitzchak Cohen, V'Rachel. But we gained more clarity of what our mission is here. To honor them, we honor them not only by remembering, but by continuing, by being living letters of their Torah, our Torah, by learning here, by supporting Israel, and by perceiving life not as something to get through, but living a good, happy, and meaningful one. Thank you.